Okay, we're live.
All right.
Yay. Hey, everybody that's watching later. This is my friend Susan, and I'm Holly. And now you get to eavesdrop on our conversation about Jesus Feminist, week 3. So, all right, Susan, I'm going to send us our first question here. So, chapter 3 talks about marriage. Chapter 3 is mostly about marriage. So, of course, the topic of submission is a key part of Sarah's discussion. And so I wrote all of our questions this week because I'm a question.
Oh, the question just went away.
Oh, no.
Let me see. Would it be here with this Q&A thing? Oh, here it is.
You get it?
There it is. Okay.
So what I want to talk about is like what feelings come up for you when you hear the word submission. What are positive things that can come out of submission? And then also I just want to talk about like how do you see fruitful submission played out in areas other than marriage? So this is a classic Holly question because there's really 3 questions in here, but I put it into one. I'm famous when I write curriculum for being like, oh, there's only 5 questions this week, but really it's like 20. So
gotcha.
So this is like part of the reason I phrased the things that I did is because obviously I'm not married.
Right.
And so I kind of wanted us to think outside the box as far as like, how does submission relate to my life? Like, you know, outside of marriage. And then also knowing that if submission is in the word, then it does have value, even if it's been perverted. So yeah, do you have any kind of initial thoughts on submission?
My first thought when I hear submission is it gets my hackles up and I'm like, I am not submitting to anyone. That is not, that's it in a nutshell. And then positive things coming out of submission, I'm gonna have to think about that a little bit.
Yeah, so one of the things that that comes up immediately when I think about this topic is when my theology was more conservative, I went to the Gospel Coalition's Women's Conference several years ago. And while there's a lot of things that I learned there that I might not agree with anymore, Tim and Kathy Keller, who pastor in New York City, talked on marriage. And they're more complementarian in their views on things. But one thing that Kathy said really stuck out to me. And she talked about how the Trinity submits to each other, how Christ submitted to the Father's will, and how the Holy Spirit submits to Christ. And, you know, she kind of went through this idea that the Trinity is in constant submission to each other. And she went on to say something like, I figure that if submission didn't kill Jesus, it won't kill me either, I think is what she said. And even though I don't know that I would consider myself a complementarian anymore, I thought the way she presented that was like really valuable and beautiful. And really, I don't know that this was her intention because I think she was making the case for complementarianism, but it really, to me, it was very redeeming of the word submission, because like the idea that, and I guess this also connects for me, like being the leader of this organization, I have seen the trouble that I get into when I don't submit myself to counsel and authority, and I've seen the fruit that's produced when I do submit myself to counsel and authority. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean that I'm not like happy when I do it. We just had a board meeting on Tuesday, and board meetings are like really hard for me. Like I rarely walk away from them feeling really good because I have to get feedback on what I want to do, and I get told no or slow down or we want to see further documentation. And you know, for a visionary, that's like, go ahead and kill me now. Like, you know, just let me do what I want to do. I don't want to put an Excel sheet together. But I know that my life is, and my ministry is better when I not only submit, but my heart is better when I do that with like a good spirit about me, not like begrudgingly. And I think where I learned to do that actually was in counseling. Like, I think I learned submission in counseling, and now it's starting to like spill out into like other areas. But I had a mental health crisis a couple of years ago where I literally was not in a place to make decisions on my own. And kind of the way that my community and my family and my treatment team kind of structured it is that my counselor was like the do or die. Like, if Tricia says this is good, we're going to do it. And if Tricia says no, we're not going to do it. And that came after me making a lot of like really poor, dangerous, harmful decisions, you know, like,
yeah.
And so I, for a season, really had my autonomy taken from me lovingly. And now, of course, I have a lot of that back. And while I like to run things by my counselor, I'm now happy to make decisions on my own again. But I think I really believe in some ways, I cannot believe I'm about to say this because I would not have believed this a few years ago, but I really think submission in some ways like saved my life. Like, that choosing to say, like, I don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
I'm not in a place to lead right now. I need other people that I trust to like set the guardrails and make the calls. Like, I see so much fruit in that I think it's reframed submission for me. And, you know, Sarah kind of talks about that in the chapter. She, you know, uses that analogy of the dance. That like, she literally says, like, in some seasons I've led, in some seasons Brian's led,
yeah.
in some seasons we both led, you know, that it's not a stagnant thing. In your marriage, like, how have you experienced like these concepts of like leadership and submission?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you just put a whole different perspective of the word into my head, and thank you for that.
You're welcome.
For me, it's just that, you know,
right.
hardball, you know, you're going to do what I say because I say it, which is how I am as a teacher sometimes, but I'm working on that too. Yeah, in our marriage, we are pretty equal, and there are times when one of us, you know, kind of takes the lead on something, or one of us holds back because we know the other person has a passion about something and needs to go with it. And I am at a loss for words.
Do you, like, in the church setting you're in, is there, like, because I feel like that's another place that this word can either be really valuable or really harmful. Like, do whatever your pastors say no matter what, or don't have any respect for your pastors. So what has been, even if that hasn't been the word that's used, like, what has been your experience in your life as far as like listening to leadership in the church, and like when you push back? And
yeah, there were a couple of different pastors that I really didn't have a lot of respect for, and felt like they were leading us in a wrong direction. And it wasn't that everyone was, you know, gung-ho and following them and submitting to whatever they wanted to do. Although sometimes in the Methodist Church, we get to be real pastor-led instead of church-led.
Yeah.
But in the first case, we just grumbled behind his back and, you know, fussed about it all the time. But also in the Methodist Church, pastors are appointed and not, you know, the congregation itself doesn't have a whole lot of say in who's going to be your pastor. So in that case, there was a lot of people who left and a lot of people who grumbled, and we decided to stay, and we're not exactly sure to this day why we decided to stay, but we did. And then another, when we finally decided to leave that congregation, was when a pastor was, let me see how I'm going to say it. He was kind of like a used car salesman, you know, kind of everything is wonderful all the time, and it's not, and kind of backhand deals of things going on, and just the leadership was what we had the big problem with. And then when they made a decision that was like polar opposite of what they told us was going to be the decision. That's when we decided. And I pushed back hard then.
Yeah.
You know, I went in with him and, you know, yelled and cried and cussed maybe a little bit. And, you know, just,
Yeah.
and at that point it was like, you know, I don't know if I can keep going. And at that time I was I was one of those people that was doing 50 things, you know, in the church at that time. And so I said, I don't know. And we're going to take a little break and see. And
Yeah.
we decided, nope, we're ready to move on from that because it's just not healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that reminds me. So this is making me think about how do we raise our daughters to be strong but humble, gentle but not doormats. How do we teach them like a healthy picture of submission in a culture, in a church that often teaches an unhealthy picture?
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking about my parents because I grew up in a house. I didn't know this was abnormal until I went to college. Like so many things. Like you just think people do things and then you like leave and you're like, wait, you don't eat this with this, or, you know, you don't call this, or, but we just always were taught, like, if there's a problem, we say something. We don't grumble, we don't complain. So like at restaurants, my parents were never rude, but if there was a problem, they always spoke up. And so I got to middle school at my Methodist church, and we had a youth pastor, and it was just really bad. And I went at it several ways, you know, trying to see if it could work with her and see if we could change things and see if we could, you know, get the youth group to a healthy place. And it ended up that I told my parents, like, and of course my parents were involved and saw it, like, I don't think that this can be fixed if she remains in this position. And my parents, loving the Methodist Church and the avenues for change, said, then you should go to the SPRC. For all you Methodists watching, that's like the people overstaffing. And I wrote a letter as a 8th grader.
Wow.
And went to this committee meeting with my parents' support and outlined my concerns, and in a non-threatening way just said, like, if you as the leadership don't address this, like, my family has to look elsewhere because I have to be in a healthy youth group. And I don't know that I can fully understand as an adult how formative that was for me. I probably don't recognize like how formative that was for my parents to teach me.
Because that's what you're doing still to this day.
Right. And that's for my parents to teach me this fine line of, hey, we're going to respect the systems that are in place. And we're not going to gossip, and we're not going to pitch a fit. But also we're going to stand up for what we believe is right. And unfortunately, like, they didn't respond, and we left the church. And also it says so much about my parents that they submitted to me as their 8th grade daughter. You know, I think so many parents would have been like, well, it's working for us, so sorry, you know, you're just a hormonal
Oh, that's great.
So anyway, so I guess what I'm trying to get back to is, like, how do we teach parents to teach kids to do what my parents did, in particular little girls, of saying, like, it's good to respect people, and it's good to work up the chain of command, and it's good to not just completely, you know, be a crazy lady, but also, like, godly submission is not silence. It's not avoiding conflict. It's not not speaking truth. And it just makes me think about, how are we raising our little girls to be grace-filled truth speakers, in particular in the church. And then the last thing that came up for me around, like, church submission is how it makes a lot of sense to me when churches were in houses that there would be this call to submit to your leaders, because there would be like 12 of you.
Mm-hmm.
And they would know your story, and they would know your life, and they would know your joys and your sorrows and your struggles, and you would know theirs. And you would trust them at this really deep, intimate level because they were really close to you. I have a hard time understanding how that translates to a large church.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it hard to submit to leaders that you don't know very well.
Yeah.
And that you feel like don't know you. And I don't even know what the solution, I'd have no solutions. But I think that's probably important to note if we just try to like take a scripture from the New Testament and be like, well, in the early church, they were so good at submitting to their elders, you know, and I'm like, yeah, and they also like raised each other's kids and broke bread together multiple times, you know, and so I think that's really hard to understand how to navigate that. And I mean, thankfully, like, even though I'm at a large church, I don't feel like my pastors know me deeply, nor do I feel like I know them deeply.
Mm-hmm.
But I think as a gift from the Holy Spirit, I do feel like I trust them. Like, I trust their heart.
Yeah, I'd say that about mine too. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I don't know. Any other thoughts on submission in any relationships or the church or?
Well, just a quick little, as you were talking about raising your daughters, I have a daughter who's 26, just got married, and she is an amazing, strong young woman, but I don't know what I did to contribute to that, because we're no conflict stuff at people. And somehow she became the person who will speak up and say what needs to be said. And she is just an amazing person. So,
that's awesome. And she's teaching you. Like, that's what's so cool, because my family's in the season where all 3 siblings, like, we're all grown. And it's so cool to get, like, some of that mutuality.
Yeah.
Where you're, like, teaching each other and challenging each other and learning from each other. And so, and, like, I always joke with my parents that they should write a book about how to be parents to adults, because they're just really good at it. Like, they're willing to learn from us. They're willing to let us lead. They're willing, you know, but they haven't abandoned us altogether, right? They didn't swing to one string.
Right, yeah.
Like, they've met in the middle. So that's awesome. Okay, let me throw our next question in the comments. This is from page 73, which is in that first chapter, or the first chapter we read this week.
Okay, I did read the first chapter.
So this wasn't even something she was like really focusing on. It was just a phrase, but it like really caught my attention, and I was like, we've got to talk about that.
Oh, just today.
Yeah. Okay.
At lunch, we were talking. I don't even remember what we were talking about. One of my colleagues, or a couple of colleagues, and she was talking about her daughter and her daughter's boyfriend, who's a nice guy, but not a whole lot of common sense and not really real responsible. And she said, my husband, it just drives me crazy, because he's the kind of person that says the man is the head of the family and the man should be in charge, and he's not taking care of his family. She goes, I know that sounds really bad, but that's just the way he is.
Yeah,
there it is. You know, just people.
Yeah, and to me, like, the phrase soft patriarchy, I never heard it before, and I think it's a really brilliant phrase. So I just asked, like, does this resonate with you, and have you seen it play out in the church and or at culture at large? This is why, and I may have shared this in another time we got together, but I have a church planter friend in Boston. He went to Harvard, and it's a Methodist church plant, very progressive. And we've had some really interesting conversations about what we do at Mended. And pretty early on, he said, like, well, I don't think my church would need what y'all do. That's what he told me. And I said, like, I disagree. And he was like, but, like, we're progressive, like we're fully affirming of women in ministry. And I said, oh yeah, like I hear you. But like there are always places where even the most progressive churches are, without even knowing it, like not fully equipping their women or not having their voices heard in leadership, and I feel like that phrase now that I know is soft patriarchy, like things that are just built into the cake, you know, like they're just mixed in. And if you don't, until you're aware, you're not aware. And then when you're aware, you're really aware. Like, I feel like it's one of those things that like, now that I'm aware, I see it everywhere. But until you're aware, and, you know, I think more progressive women can be really hard on more conservative women and judgmental.
Well, that's probably me.
Well, I'm preaching to the choir here.
Yeah.
I've definitely done that. But I think what I've had to realize in my own story and in the stories of others that I know well is like, oh, I didn't see it for a long time. Like, I thought that this worked and that this was, I mean, sometimes I didn't think it just worked. I thought it was God's best, you know, like, and at seasons it legitimately did work for me. And so I've had to remind myself, in particular with like girlfriends that I'm close to that walk in a different theology when it comes to like women and men's roles, is that like, one, I can still be good friends with you, right? Like, this is not like a life or death issue. This is not a hill to die on. Like, we're okay. If we want to live our marriages in different ways someday, like, we'll be fine. But two, that I just need to be patient, like, and pray that at the right time God would reveal to them, if it is best for them, like, areas where patriarchy exists. I think my holdup in that is that, like, patriarchy is harmful. Like it wounds.
Yeah.
Even if people don't know they're being wounded in the midst of it. And so how do we be patient and honor people's process and honor how God's working, but also identify, like, if I think this thing is harmful to you, should I say something?
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense, but I find that very puzzling about how to deal with that. Because I do sometimes feel like I see negative or like not good fruit being produced in friends that are in more patriarchal situations. And I don't know, maybe I just want to avoid conflict and just be like, oh, they'll figure it out eventually, you know?
Yeah, I was just reading a thing this evening. My daughter, who is amazing, I've already said that, is a counselor who works with children coming out of domestic abuse. And so this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and so I'm very aware right now. But a thing popped up about, it was an article, I don't know who wrote it or anything because it was online, you know, but about the image of God in heaven and hell, and that kind of God as patriarch, how that kind of correlates to that thinking, that, well, if I'm the man and you're not pleasing me, then it's my right.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh my gosh. That, you know, I was just like,
that's okay. Will you post that in our Facebook group?
I will see if I can find it. Yes, I will.
Yeah. That's such a, the idea that's really, wow, there's a lot to unpack there. The idea that, and this makes sense because we always talk about, like, theology is like what you believe about God, and what you believe about God impacts everything, like whether you identify it or not. And so the idea that if we view God as violent and vengeful and authoritative and mean and easily angered, that it can actually allow us and in particular men. That's interesting.
Yeah.
To think that somehow this is a reflection of God's character.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, no, that's, man,
Yeah.
my mind's going to have to sit on that for a while. Yeah. I mean, it totally makes sense. Like how I view God impacts how I view myself.
Right.
But I haven't heard it framed in that kind of context.
Yeah, I hadn't either. And I was just like, whoa. Yeah.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah.
So yeah, have you ever watched the show The West Wing?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I'm behind. I'm just now watching it.
All right, no spoilers.
I am, okay, yeah. So, but I am in the season, and I'm going to be careful because I don't want to spoil it for anyone watching the video. But you'll know what I'm talking about, and so will other people that have watched it. I'm in the season where one of the women on the show gets a really big promotion. And then these next few episodes are just this case study in misogyny and sexism in the workplace and women in powerful leadership positions. And watching them this past week, I've almost not known how to feel. Like, do I feel hopeful because this large show painted a realistic picture? Do I feel yucky because this is a realistic picture?
It is, yeah, yeah. Tell me what season. I'll go back and rewatch that.
Okay, I think it's season 6.
Okay.
I think it's season 6. Okay. And so it just, to me, like, I think a great place to look for soft patriarchy is in like corporate America.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. At Sunday school, I was talking to the gal beside me who is a retired pastor, and something came up about something that made me think of this, and so I was talking about the book study, and it was just the point that, I was kind of surprised when I first realized that it was a thing. And she's like, oh yeah. She's been was a pastor for 40 years and just retired. And she said, and you would think that it would be the people in the small rural churches that would have a problem with a woman pastor. That they're thrilled to have whoever, very open. But when she was in the big church in the city, it was the attorneys and the bankers who had the problem with her. I was like, oh, interesting.
No, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I would love
who are powerful have problems with a powerful woman.
I was like, because that's like so interesting, especially because I feel like this most recent election has brought up a lot of discussions about like rural areas versus metropolitan areas, and kind of these two different worlds that we're living in, and trying to learn to understand each other. But it is interesting because we have this stereotype of the rural person being close-minded and conservative in a negative way, and but man, that's so interesting that she specifically listed powerful men
that had the problem,
not just men or women in metropolitan areas, but men that were used to being in charge. And again, I don't know, it's so interesting because I don't even know that I'm called to have kids, so it's interesting that I think so much about how I would raise them if I had them. But then it makes me ask, like, how do you raise little boys who believe that they have a calling, who believe that they are powerful in the Lord, right? Like, especially white boys that I would probably raise unless I adopted. How do you help them, like, understand their privilege and how it's baked into the cake without, like, saying you just need to sit down and shut up? Because obviously that's not God's best. To me, that's almost more confusing than raising empowered women, is how do we raise men that are strong and called and have vision and driven while still identifying like you need to take a back seat, and you need to be aware that like we literally have statistics now that say that women are interrupted more in conference meetings, and that women can literally give it an idea and it's ignored, and then a man says the same idea 10 minutes later.
Oh,
and
brilliant.
heralded, you know? And so this isn't just a few of us saying this is happening.
Yeah.
Like Sheryl Sandberg, who works at Facebook, her book Lean In, that caused a real stir a few years ago. I got to read it finally this summer, I think, and I found it really valuable. It obviously wasn't written about the church at all, but I think a lot of it's incredibly applicable to the church.
This pastor gal said that definitely recommended Hillary's book, What Happened, because a lot of it was about that, you know, patriarchy and
interesting. Okay.
Back from that. So I'm like, okay, it's on the list, but it's not at the top of the list.
Right. Yeah.
I can't even get done the one I need to read 2 chapters in a week, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think speaking about like misogyny and soft patriarchy in politics, I think we will really start to get some clarity, and the scales will fall off, hopefully, of some people's eyes in 3 years if another woman runs. Because I think, like, because of, you know, kind of the political dynasty that Hillary came from, a lot of people would have the excuse of, it's not that I won't vote for a woman, it's that I won't vote for her. And I think we'll really know if that was true.
Right. Yeah.
In a few years when a woman runs again.
Yeah.
And how people handle that, and where there are similarities and where there really are differences.
Yeah.
But we know that the reality is, and I think politics is a great example, that all the time when women politicians run, they get questions about balancing family and office. And that never happens for men. And you know, I think that's literally, like, I'm just like obsessed with the word soft patriarchy now, because I feel like I have friends who are smart, like they're smart and educated and are aware that the world is not equal and that people are marginalized. But if I say something like, it's like we're stuck in 1950 with misogyny, they're like, I don't see it. Like, I don't, like, women can get jobs and women can vote and women can own property. Like, aren't we there? And then I be able to say, like, we are there, and that there isn't hard patriarchy nearly as much.
Yeah. But it's just like saying that racism is solved, you know, because we have our president. No. Right.
No, exactly. And so I just think this phrase is really helpful to kind of put a framework around just what we've all experienced at some level. I don't know if you're on Twitter, but when all the most recent sexual assault allegations came out in Hollywood, there was this big
Me Too stuff
campaign.
Yeah.
And I, for the first time, shared about this very, in my mind, little thing that happened. And I've never thought of it as assault or harassment. I've just always felt like, oh, I did something wrong, and that's kind of shameful, and, you know, just like a little thing. And as I started listening to everyone talk about it, I was like, oh, like, that isn't the same as being, like, beaten up in an alley, like, but that was not my fault, and it was not okay what happened.
Yeah.
But I live in a culture where rape on college campuses is just accepted. So of course, I'm not going to speak up about this tiny little harassment thing that happened on my college campus, because that's so normalized. And that was honestly crazy to me, because I'm involved in these conversations. I know women who are sharing their stories. Like, it's not like I'm not in safe environments. You know, like, I'm in safe environments with good people who believe you when you say things. And yet I still had never connected the dots.
Yeah.
This thing that had happened, and realizing, like, oh, like, that happened to me because I was a woman, and because a man took advantage of me, and because patriarchy is baked into the cake, especially in the church, to, after it happened, instead of me being like, hey man, that's not okay, I've walked around for 7 years feeling like, oh gosh, I got to make sure that doesn't happen again. You know,
yeah, yeah.
I said, when I shared about it on Twitter, I said, like, I've literally contemplated going to this guy's now wife and like confessing. And then as I was processing all this, I realized, like, what was I going to confess? Like, hey, your husband did this. Like I didn't, you know, like, what was I gonna, but yet I had walked, and I guarantee you, I don't guarantee you, I feel confident that he doesn't remember it. You know,
It's just those little things that.
Right. Because it's been baked into the cake for him too, as a man. That it's okay for it to have happened, and that it's okay for him to have made the comments he made. And for me, I've walked around with this shame that probably partly comes from purity culture. Like, purity culture is like an added layer of soft patriarchy of not only this happens to me, but I should carry the burden of it happening. You know, because if I had been dressed the right way, this wouldn't have happened. That was what I carried around. It's like, I need to dress this way now instead of this way, and so that it will happen.
That just drives me crazy.
So
like, you're telling me that because you're a guy, you don't have any self-control, period, and it's our fault.
Yeah. No, there's a book called Singled Out, and it's like not a big book, and it makes me so sad because I think it should be like mandatory reading for Christians. And it's written by 2 women. They're older. I think they're in their at least 40s, maybe 50s when they write the book, and they've never been married. And it's about their experience as a single person in the church long term. And they specifically talk about what you were just saying, that we have bought into the lie as a church at large that God and the Holy Spirit can help us wrangle all of our temptations, all of our sin tendencies, all the broken places in our heart, besides sexuality. And sexuality is just too hard for God. It's just too much for his Holy Spirit. And so we need to do anything we can to try to wrangle in our sexuality, because yes, God can help me with this and this and this, but with this, we just need to control it instead of submitting it to the Holy Spirit. And of course, as single people, this impacts us in lots of ways. They may have specifically been talking about how a lot of people have the rule where, like, you can't meet with anyone who's married of the opposite. And how much that impacts you if you're a single person. But the idea that sexuality is just this monster that even with the help of God Almighty, we can't keep it together, is so damaging. And putting the weight of it on women.
Exactly.
I may try to find this. Man, we're going to have all sorts of articles to post. You're welcome, everyone. Susan and I are very helpful. But I think it was maybe at a university in Missouri or Kansas. They did a art display.
The What I Was Wearing thing.
Yes, the What I Was Wearing
at KU. Yes.
And oh my gosh, like, it just is brilliant. Like, it's just brilliant.
I was wearing jeans, a turtleneck, and a great big coat.
Right. And so, I think modesty culture probably pretty directly ties in to soft patriarchy.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other thoughts before we move on?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
We could go on and on, but
of course we could. Okay, this question, this may be my favorite quote from these 2 chapters, which is saying a lot. On page 93, she says, "This is the mark of a soul in pursuit of Jesus. We recognize him." Where have you seen Jesus lately? And what can cause you to miss him in the rhythms of your everyday life?
Ooh. Let me think how to put this in words.
Yeah, no, we can definitely take a second.
Yeah. Well, the other day, my daughter and my husband went to a training for people in law enforcement and the attorneys and prosecutors and all on dealing with victims who have been traumatized. And that same day, just by coincidence, we had a training after school on dealing with students who have had trauma.
Wow.
And so we had all of this discussion about, you know, how it literally physically changes the brain. And you know, I could just see the wheels turning in my little head going, oh my gosh, this changes how I look at so many kids.
Yeah.
I'm not looking at them as that annoying, stupid brat. I'm looking at them as, oh, you know, you damaged child, and what can we do to help make your life better instead of just coming down on you all the time?
That's so good.
You know, it just was wonderful, just so life-changing, you know, for me as someone who works with kids who a lot of times have had so much go on in their lives.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying with little baby steps to try, you know, seeing them through that lens when I'm frustrated, and think, you know, they gave us some suggestions of things to do and say instead, because punishment doesn't work. I love the one thing that she said, you know, a lot of these kids, you can't scare them because they've been scared their whole lives. Wow. What you could do as a teacher is not scary at all compared to things that they've experienced. It's like, oh my gosh. So
yeah,
that's where Jesus is shining right now, just on how I look at kids and their parents, because a lot of them,
of course,
you know, a lot of kids have been traumatized because the parents were.
Yeah.
And it just passes it on, you know.
Yeah. No, I actually saw an article probably a month ago where they studied how trauma in the brain they think now is genetically passed on.
And yes.
You know, that like who they looked at was the children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors.
Yeah.
And that even though their children and grandchildren could have lived very trauma-free lives, that similar areas in their brain had been genetically changed.
It's like those little switches in the genes, and if it switches on, then it passes on that way.
Right.
And
yeah,
I mean, so you think clear, you know, Native Americans,
absolutely,
people who lived in slavery,
right?
All of those totally generations and generations after.
Yeah.
What effect has that had?
For sure. No. And you know what gives me such great joy in how Jesus is showing up for you is its connection to science. Like, I love that like through neuroscience and through psychology, and that Jesus is showing up through science, because it's so sad when the church pits itself against science.
Oh yeah.
Because science to me is this beautiful way that Jesus reveals his truth. And so that's really cool. For me, I've had kind of a hard week. Like, it's just been one of those weeks where like nothing works, you know, like your dog is throwing up and this event is crazy and you're like, oh my gosh, like, can I just get some traction here? And so I kind of hit this wall yesterday morning where I was just like, I cannot believe that like this week is not over. I can't believe that I have to try to like minister this weekend. Like, this is not good. And you know, I didn't like pray for a long time, like, oh God, please fix this all, but God just started like, he probably had been there the whole time and was being faithful, but I was struggling to see it in the midst of the chaos. But all these different friends just started calling and texting, and a girlfriend said like, I'm coming in town tonight to go to this thing and I think you should go with me. And it was just like these little things where God was just saying like, hey, I'm here, like, and your people are here, like your people are here and they show you Jesus, so get around them, you know. And like, even this morning, I had to leave earlier than I expected to travel. And so one of my girlfriends came over and like put clothes in a suitcase and like walked things down the stairs and like, you know, and I just texted her afterwards and just said like, the way that you honor me, that's like the best word I could come up with. The way that you honor me shows me God. Like the way that my friends treat me reminds me, oh, like this is who God is. Like God honors me and God shows up for me and God affirms me, you know, like, and so, and of course, then the added thing is that it makes me want to be like, am I showing my friends God? Like, am I honoring, am I affirming, and like, I want to live like these friends live, you know? And so, and then the thing I got to go to last night was a night with Jen Hatmaker. Ordeman, and it was just beautiful. And Jesus was so present there. And it was just really stripped down. Like it wasn't fancy. They used whatever podium and chairs the facility had. You know, there weren't big backdrops or anything like that. And I think especially for the season I'm in right now, I really need that. I think beauty is important. And so I think pretty backdrops can be valuable and stuff. But I think I'm in this season where the church just feels like too much. It feels over the top, and I'm trying to get my, you know, find out like where's my niche here. And so to go somewhere where they just use like the crappy scratched up podium felt like really good to me. Also, it was on wheels, and Jen kept leaning on it, and that. Also, I don't know who makes a podium with wheels that don't have brakes on them, but apparently they had one there. But I think in particular, I don't know if you listen to Nicole Nordeman at all, but I would highly recommend every song she's ever written in the entire world. But her most recent album, it just like met me right where I was at. And so she played a lot of music from it. And I think probably why I felt Jesus so present, both in Jen's talks and in Nicole's music, is that everything was very raw. And not raw like we're trying to be raw because it's hip to be raw. Because sometimes now I'm like, oh, we're being authentic because what sells, you know? It was like, hey, like, we're here to serve you, and the best way that we can serve you is to bring our whole selves to the table. And so really it felt like, I guess honor is like my word of the week, because I literally felt honored by them, that they would trust me with these raw, vulnerable songs and stories and tears. Like, I just wanted to hold their heart so gently because it wasn't this pre-packaged shiny thing. And so I think just being in sacred spaces like that, I recognize that Jesus is with the vulnerable, and that he's with the raw, and that he's in the mess, and like all those things that I know to say. Like I know those answers, like I get paid to say those things, you know, but like I think sometimes I can like forget deep down that that's like truth, like deep, rich truth. So
I think that's one of the things I love about Sarah, because I mean, she experiences the same things that we all experience, but then she's able to dig down and see the truth in those experiences that I just gloss right on over on the way to the next thing, you know? And so she really helps me to stop and reflect on things and to see the beauty in them, and to see God in things, when otherwise I'm just going right on and not even stopping to think about it, you know?
No, that's so interesting. That's literally connected to what, so Jen talked a lot last night about pain, and she went over all these different ways that we deal with pain that are not good ways. But one of the things she said we do is we rush it. She said that Christians like a quick pain arc, that we want to say this, we want to say, okay, this really bad thing happened, I learned a few great things, and we're done. And
now it's over.
That we don't want to sit in it and like push through and work through it, but that's actually like where all the fruit and growing happens. So it's interesting it's interesting that you bring that up. And I think Jen didn't talk about this, but like, I think we all have to uniquely figure out with how God made us, how do we sit in the pain? Mm-hmm. And I think for Sarah, it's writing. And that's why we get all of her knowledge, is because she sits and she processes through her pain through writing. And I think one thing that probably a lot of us just don't know is like, when I feel pain, what do I do with it? And because we don't know, then we rush through it. Or some of the other examples Jen gave is like, we ignore it or fake it, we numb it. You know, she gave all these examples. But and then I want to hear if you have any thoughts on kind of the second part of this question. What can cause you to miss Jesus in the rhythms of your everyday life?
Pretty much just the rhythms of everyday life. Trying to get everything done in a day and, focusing on the problems or the whatever's going on and not taking any time to stop and reflect, which is something I'm real guilty of a lot.
Yeah.
No, that's why I like doing this, because it makes me stop and think.
Right.
It's like if I just read the questions at the back of the book, I'm like, blah, 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 blah. Oh, I don't know. Next question. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So no, this is really good. Because
that makes a lot of sense to me, because I would say like the pace of life causes me to miss him. I think that like not having a spirit of gratitude also for me, like living in a spirit that sees like the lack or the scarcity versus the abundance. That's something I preached on last weekend, is that like we're to be people of abundance, not scarcity. Like the world is supposed to be a place of scarcity and we're supposed to be abundance people. Yeah. But when you're in the world all the time and there's this constant message of scarcity, it's really hard to not get there in your mind. And so like, even though sometimes it feels so cheesy to do it because it feels like, 8th grade church camp or something, when I take the time to sit down with a journal and literally just write things out, either that I'm grateful for or like where I see Jesus, like how did my old youth minister have us journal it? It was like we would do two things. We would write Christ denied, and we would reflect on our day on areas where we missed Christ or missed chances to be Christ. And then I can't remember the phrase we used for the other one, but it was like Christ revealed or something, where we, journaled out like places that we saw Christ and places where we saw Christ working in us in the world. And if I could get over, like, don't worry about it being cheesy or what you did in youth group. Like, if it's helpful, do it. Like, don't be stubborn, and prideful. But I think like that intentional time to stop and say, like, Jesus showed up somewhere today. He had to have. Like, he was here.
Yeah, yeah.
Where was he? Like, where was he? Stop and think about it. Like, where did he show up? Where maybe in the moment you didn't pause and see him. But you can at least pause, at the beginning or end of your day. And my hope would be, if I could start doing that consistently, that eventually, as those things were happening, I would have eyes to see him.
That's good. Yeah.
Like once my mind, it's almost like that. I mean, let your mind be transformed. It talks about like transforming my mind to have eyes to see Jesus. But I kind of love how Sarah lays this out as the marker of like, if you want to know if you're following and pursuing Jesus,
do you see him?
And I do think that's another one of Sarah's gifts, is like simplifying things. I think that's why I resonated with her so much, is that she simplifies it without being shallow. Maybe that's what's so cool about her. Like she's really deep and really rich, but really simple.
Yeah.
So
and so often just so beautiful and eloquent that
brings
you to tears practically,
Yeah, no, for sure. She's like a poet too.
Yeah.
Okay, any other thoughts on that before I throw up our
No, I think that's good.
Okay. So let's see. Okay, yeah, here it is. So this is a quote, and I know you didn't get to this chapter, but I think you'll be able to track with me.
Okay.
She says, life is tidier with myths and rules. The complex realities of the countercultural life in the vine living are what baffle. So she's talking about this idea of like, we want rules and systems and laws and black and white boxes that we can check. And instead, God tells us to like follow this radical Jesus and like literally hook into the vine and be ready for anything. And so I just said, in this season, where are you finding Jesus to be complex? And then also, what do you think God's purpose is in filling our faith journeys with paradoxes and really confusing parables? And she talks about that God is a both and God, not an either or God. And so I just love for us to talk a little bit about that. For me, I think it would be shorter for me to say where I don't find Jesus complex right now. I'm really in the smack dab middle of kind of deconstructing everything. And everything is on the table for reflection and a magnifying glass and picking it apart. And my deconstruction is really slow because I'm heart driven and not head driven. And so I can't move at the pace of some of my friends. And that's really frustrating because they're already coming to conclusions and I'm like barely touching it. But I think one example I would give is that I just keep having this vision over and over again of this really long table, just this really, really long table. And that I really believe that Minda can be a place where women that are really, 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 really different can sit at the table together. And that we can have people that voted for Donald Trump and people that voted for Hillary Clinton and people who don't think you should vote and people that go to an Acts 29 Reformed Baptist church and people who go to an LGBTQ affirming Episcopal church, like that we could really all sit down and like not do it out of obligation, like really like each other and walk with each other and listen to each other and learn from each other. And so I have this vision, and of course I'm a visionary, so I get fired up about it, and I'm like, yeah, that's totally God, and like the last thing Jesus prayed for us was to have unity, and and so this is it, like this is his vision. And then the like realities of how the church world works hit me. And I feel discouraged, and I feel like how do I do it? Like I have this great vision, but how do I do it? And then I feel in particular towards very, very conservative Christians, how do I say that you're welcome at the table and fully loved and fully accepted, but also like, where's the line, I guess maybe is what I'm saying. Where are the hills that we die on? Where are the things that we can't agree to disagree on? And that's hard. Like, that's really hard to navigate because I think you'll laugh at this. After the Las Vegas shooting, I woke up very frustrated and hopeless and just feeling disappointed in the church for not being holistically pro-life and all these things. And God just I was in the shower, I think. It's one of the only times I'm still enough for him to get through to me. But he just said, your enemy is the NRA. And I was like, yeah, I know. I don't know why you're telling me that. I'm aware. And he was like, yeah, and I told you to pray for your enemies. And I was like, ugh. Oh. So I literally got out of the shower and started looking up pictures and names for all of the leadership of the NRA.
Wow.
And tried to they weren't very holy prayers and they were very short and probably not very heartfelt. But I was like, I have to start somewhere, Wow. And so I guess what I'm saying is there are a lot of people who believe things that I believe are like wrong, like sinful, like evil.
Yeah.
And yet, I believe that the table is where change happens in so many ways. And anyway, so obviously it's okay for me to say I'm confused because the answer is what's complex. So that's my question is like, how do you have this big, big open table and still say like, yo, you can't say that. Like, you can sit at my table, but you cannot say that. Like, that's not okay. And then, of course, I get angry because I have progressive friends that wouldn't be welcomed at a conservative table because they would say, yo, you can't say that, you know? And man, I just then get where I'm like, Jesus, just come back. Like, there's no, like, I go from like really visionary, like, yeah, we can bring the kingdom and let's do it. And let's make a plan to like, nope, hopeless. Jesus, you're just gonna have to fix it because this is impossible, you know? So.
Oh, yeah.
What about you?
Yeah. Well, in that Sunday school class last week, that same pastor, Pat, because we're talking, the whole Methodist Church, you know, is looking at mostly the human sexuality question. And is that going to split us apart? Are we going to be able to find a way? And so all the churches are being asked to, you know, submit their thoughts and all. And what she was saying is we really need to look at what is at the core of our beliefs and what issues are on the periphery that are not central to our Christian belief. And I said, oh, yeah. And, you know, really, God is love is the core of our belief. Yeah. And human sexuality should be out here on the edges somewhere so that we can all believe this one thing. Yeah. And those other things shouldn't matter as much. But I'm the one who couldn't sit at the table.
Yeah, no.
So I get so judgy. And just, I don't know, the last 2 or 3 years, I've just been really, really on fire for all kinds of social justice. You know, just reading everything I can, Black Lives Matter stuff and LGBTQ stuff and everything I can, you know, mass incarceration and everything I can read, and just getting really on fire about it. But then it's like, where do I go with it?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
As a shy person in a small city, as a white person, where do I go?
Yeah.
You know, so
no, that's,
I don't know.
Yeah, that's so good. You know, we have a doctrinal statement at Mended so that people are like, what do you believe is an organization? But we're re-looking at it because it's been several years and a lot of our board members have changed. And I've joked, but I'm kind of serious that like, I wish, I'm sorry, the dogs have seen something outside and they're very excited. Guys, stop. But like I've joked that I just want it to be like doctrinal statement and then like Jesus in big letters. Like this is like, if you want to be a part of this, like this is what we believe. And yes, I have my personal views on X, Y, or Z, but like if you are a Jesus person or interested in being a Jesus person, then this is your place, you know? And all those other things we can sort out. We can wrestle with and we can agree to disagree on. And so, yeah. And there's an organization called Red Letter Christians. I don't know if you ever.
Yeah. I get their little newsletter every.
Yeah. Like I think more recently I've started to realize how much I love their name and how at the end of the day, for me in this season, at least, like Jesus just trumps it all. Like he just trumps it all. Like he trumps my opinions and your opinions and Paul's opinions, which I know is like,
I know that's
really controversial in the American church. I've also joked that I want to write a book called The Idolization of Paul and just write a whole book about how a lot of churches preach Paul more than they preach Jesus. Because I see that happen a lot. But yeah, and then as far, I actually do feel really confident in my answer on the second question, as far as like,
what's the second
why?
question?
Like, why is it messy? Why is it paradoxical? And this is something that thankfully God showed me several years ago, which makes deconstruction so much less scary, is that when I have all the answers, I have no need to be in relationship with God. I just do the rules. I just do the rules. Like, these are the rules. I can follow the rules. Like, I don't need to pray. I don't need to talk to you. I don't need to meditate. I'll just follow the rules, and I'm a winner. But when everything is chaotic, not even chaotic, because God is not a God of chaos. When nothing is set, when everything is circumstantial, when one day I'm supposed to do this and the next day I'm supposed to do this, I have to be in constant dialogue with the Holy Spirit in order to be faithful. Like, if one day God's best is for me to work really hard, and the next day God's best is for me to rest really hard, and I just want it to be one or the other. Like, okay, God, are we supposed to work for you, or are we supposed to rest? You know, and we read the scriptures and it's like, oh, it seems like we're supposed to do both.
Yeah.
You know, and I've just realized, like, when I get in a season where I think I know it, like, this is it, this is how you do it, and those are the seasons where my intimacy with God just falls off. But when I wake up every day wondering, like, what is faithfulness today? And like, what is obedience? And like, what do you think about this thing? Or how should I handle this person? I'm like, for me, literally like talking out loud a lot in my room, like, okay, God, what's going on here? You know, like, what should I do about this? So for me, I'm sure there's lots of reasons that God uses parables and paradox. But for me, I think he does it to draw us near to him on a continual basis. Yeah.
That's good. I have no answer for that, so that's perfect.
Now, when it gets to the parables, I'm reading the Gospels right now. Jesus is a crazy man. That's all I have to say. I can't believe we're putting this recorded on a video, but I texted my brother the day after a parable and said, I am convinced that Jesus was smoking marijuana when he wrote it. Because it is literally like incoherent. Like, I was like, what does any of this mean? Like, none of this made any sense, Jesus, you know? And I'm trying right now to like just read the text, like not get into the footnotes and like not read everyone else's opinions, but just try to sit with it. And then I finished one of the parables and I'm like, well, I think I'm going to need some footnotes, because I literally felt like you just said like gibberish, you hippie Jesus, you. And the other thing I said to my friend and to my brother was, I think if Jesus was alive today, he would listen to the kind of artsy music that you guys listen to, because I listen to music that is very straightforward. I want to understand what the person is talking about. I want to, and like, there can be art. I don't listen to bad music, but like my brother and my good friend, they listen to weird music where I'm like, I can read the lyrics and meditate on them. And I'm like, yeah, I have no idea what this is talking about. And I'm like, I think Jesus wrote this music, like this weird artsy music. So, but again, if it was simple, I would never have to sit with the text, you know, and read it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And I think the parables are like the definition of like the word is alive and active and breathing, like that the parables speak differently each time. So, well, thanks for a great talk.
Oh, this has been fun.
I am so grateful for you, Susan, and thanks everyone else for tuning in and hearing our wisdom or lack thereof. But yeah, Susan, I guess I will talk to you next week.
Okay. Well, this weekend, Saturday, I'm going to a workshop with Jim Wallace from Sojourners Magazine.
Awesome.
All about mercy and justice. So I'll probably have lots of new thoughts.
Yes. I think Jenny Yang may be there from World Relief, if I remember right.
Oh yeah.
And she's awesome. I might be wrong, but I think she tweeted today that she was going to be with him this weekend. So That's awesome. And also, if you find that article about God and
right
domestic abuse,
put it on the Facebook page.
Yeah, post it on the Facebook page, because I think that would be an interesting resource for us.
Yeah.
So, all right, Susan, I'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.
All right, bye-bye.